Good morning. In this installment of our webinar series, and let me take this opportunity as well to welcome all of you, especially those of you who have been with us since we started our series at the beginning of this year. My name is Zolani Sandiso Sonwabile Zonyane. I'm the head of editorial with the Municipal Edge. It is great to have you this morning as we really look at quite a very important, I'll say, topic. We talk about leadership, and most of time, I would say, more at a macro level. We then decided for this particular session to take it to a personal level, that is personal leadership. But before we get to the proceedings of today, it is proper to thank the team from the Municipal Edge under the leadership of Dr. Ngobo. Without that effort, without the team, we will not be here today. But most importantly, thank you, Future Cities Africa, Dan and team, on the background work that you normally do. It takes effort, sometimes sleepless nights, that's understandable, but we still pull these webinars off. This is our third of a 10 webinar series, and we believe and hope our audience is still engaged because we will not be having them in this particular session if it was not for that. But most importantly, it is proper to also thank Sangofa for the beautiful graphical work that we see for every webinar. We always have these nice graphics. We say thank you. And as I've indicated, without the participants, without the attendance, we will not be having these webinars. So thank you very much. And I see familiar faces, familiar names. It's great because it means if we've got you returning to this webinar series, there's something that we are possibly doing right. And again, I know if we're doing something wrong, you are the first to give us that particular feedback. So today we've got our three panelists, and I'll welcome them one by one. And we will do today a bit different in that we will have Umbusi Ziqalo, my friend, which I will introduce shortly. He will be the one who will be taking us or paving the way on this very important topic. As soon as he finishes with the opening, I'll ask our Councillor Nell Sewraj, which also I will introduce when the time comes for him to come in. And then I've got my friend from the Western Cape in George, JP. So I would like to keep our cameras on during the conversation so that we can have that personal touch as we proceed with the conversation. We had three areas that we shared with our panelists as we have also published and promoted the series itself, which I will then allow Umbusi. Firstly, before he comes in, Umbusi is a leadership consultant, one person that when I talk of leadership, I always look up to him, not only because he is consulting in that space, it's about the passion, it's about the understanding of leadership itself. He is also a human resource, a value chain executive. There is work that he does there on work readiness. He is also a work readiness executive. a conference moderator, a speaker, he's an author, and perhaps he'll touch a bit on his work that he has produced, which is wonderful. And for any leader, I would recommend to probably lay your hands in that craft in building this leadership. Umbusi also believes in transformation because he defines himself, to which I attest to, as a philosopher in transformational leadership. And there's one thing I like about you, my brother, when you talk about transformation, and hopefully you will touch on that today, that transformation is an inside job. Welcome, Umbusi. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you for inviting me to this presentation, to this webinar. Zolani, thanks again for the great introduction. And certainly, I do believe that transformation is an inside job. And it starts from the inside. So on the screen, as you can see, there's a picture of a caterpillar, right? Which transforms from the inside all the way to becoming a butterfly, right? And once it has transformed into a butterfly, we all know that it cannot go back to what it was. So in other words, the transformation is not just cosmetic, but it is internal and structural. So there are internal structures, you know, at a hormonal level that happen, or rather that transform as the transformation happens from a caterpillar to a butterfly. All right. So what this means is that when we look at the let me just get my notes right here. When we look at personal leadership, right, we are looking at an individual transforming the basic 4 areas or the 4 faculties of humanity, which is the mindset, the heart set, the hand set, and the social set. So by mindset, I mean that for a person to lead themselves, there must be a radical change, a radical yet progressive mindset transformation. All right? And this happens internally, not at a cosmetic level, right? Secondly, there must be a transformation in the heart set. So, in other words, the person, the individual must actually buy into progressive, radical ideas, right? And I keep emphasizing progressive because we've seen in lately, even in politics, that we have people or we have leaders, some, of course, are so-called leaders who actually are radical, but they are not progressive. So these two have got to go together if there is to be betterment or progress in the human family. And then you have the handset, which is basically what you do. So what you do is born out of your headset. It is also born out of your headset. So your thoughts and your feelings, right? Your thoughts and your feelings, they form your belief system, right? And therefore your belief system translates into your actions. And then your actions translates into how society experiences you and how also you experience society. Now, unfortunately, if this is not managed at a personal leadership level, it then will affect the world of work as we know it. Because I always say that we bring our traumas, all right, whether managed or whether unmanaged, but we bring our traumas to the world of work. And therefore, in decoding the personal leadership philosophy, right, ethics as we know them are therefore dependent largely on the philosophy of the leader, what we would also call the value system of the leader. How does the leader as a person, right, translate themselves or understand themselves, where we talk about self-awareness? And therefore, you cannot manage what you are not aware of, all right? You cannot manage what is in your blind spot. And secondly, how does the leader or the individual perceive the world? What is their philosophy towards the world out there? And whatever they make out the world to be is certainly going to be how they then interact with the world, right? And therefore that translates to how they would interact in the world of work, right? And then also what do they believe about themselves? As in my introduction, I mentioned that what do they believe about themselves as individuals? And therefore, self-knowledge solves many problems that would be encountered at a personal leadership level when we look at the world of work, right? So there is an importance of the leader's philosophy, the individual's philosophy, right? Being galvanized, being progressive, being radical, being transformed, therefore affecting the way that individual would perceive ethical issues, ethical behavior, and principles in their area of work. All right. So secondly, if we look at a transformation of the individual, right, at an individual level, we see that once the person is transformed, their leadership philosophy, all right, their leadership philosophy can eventually translate to other people, right, being influenced positively by that individual. In other words, the philosophy is, you know, it permeates and affects those who are around you. All right. So good company improves character, bad company ruins character. All right. So if we are to be leaders who are ethical, we therefore as individuals need to align ourselves with other people in the workplace who are ethical, even in society, people who are ethical. Municipalities have no chance, right? They have no chance. If we're speaking about ethics, they have no chance unless the people who make up that municipality are people who buy into personal ethics, and therefore which translates to how they act in the world of work, how they influence others in the world of work, and therefore that culture beginning to permeate, beginning to increase and infect other people into acting in similar ways, into thinking in similar ways as it relates to ethics, at least good ethics in this case. So we see therefore that it is people, it is individuals within a municipality in whatever position they are at, right, who bring their transformed agenda, transform the leadership agenda, the ethical and good practices agenda, who will then, help that municipality to gain such a culture over time. Now, without these individuals, there can be no transformation, right? Without these individuals being intentional in their transformation as individuals, and therefore the way that they behave at work, the way they interact with others and influence others, therefore becoming a culture in that organization. We can no longer, in the municipalities and other spaces, organizations, we can no longer keep the values just on the walls or the corridors and the boardrooms, just hang them there. We can no longer, be satisfied with that situation. We need to, actively hire, actively train and transform individuals, and, almost come short of saying, recruit them into the belief system where they are ethical and therefore influencing others to be ethical as well. Now, from what you sent me, Zolani, I like the word that was used on this introduction, where it says gradually transforming leadership in municipalities, gradually, which talks to the process. Once the caterpillar, which is on the screen, once it attaches itself upside down, by the tail and the head is hanging, downwards. Once it attaches itself like that, and then the transformation begins to happen from the inside. If you were to disturb that process, the butterfly would not come out. All right. Once you disturb that process, the butterfly would not come out. In other words, the process of transforming is a gradual process. It is not an event, right? It is a transformation that has a beginning. It has a lapse of time, and therefore a time where we start to realize the fruits of transforming our space, transforming our units, the departments, and therefore the entire municipality. So there is a path. Oh God.
As we wait for him to come back, just a couple of things that are picking from his presentation. It's about a person. And again, as we set to come up with a program, we wanted to deal with a person in leadership. But he also talks about influence, which is something that is of great importance, but influence that is influencing other people as a leader that you are. But in influence, there's also another thing that I want us to look at. Definitely we'll have time. Influencing the transformation of our communities. That can only happen through service delivery, because at the end of the day, we can have great leaders, we can have wonderful leaders, but there's always going to be a question. As an institution, having the great leaders who are gradually progressing towards the type of leadership that we want, can we then take that and match it with the service delivery that we see? And I think as we wait for him to come back, because honestly today is not about myself, I will be bringing in Councillor Nell Sewraj, who is the executive committee member in KwaDukuza Municipality, who's also a caucus leader of Action SA in the same municipality. Just a few opening remarks, Honorable Councillor, and probably where you need to come in. given your role in leadership, which I normally say, if you look at a municipality as an entity, you've got the council. If you were to talk about a business, which more often I view a municipality as a business enterprise. A council as a board, you've got the administrators, which will be your normal administrators in any organization. And then you've got the shareholders, which are the citizens. From your experience, looking at the administration, what is it that perhaps we are losing? Or what is it that we are not doing right? Or as a councillor, what type of administrative leadership that will make your oversight an easier one, that will make it easy for you to perform your functions? But in tackling that, you can also touch on the key 3 points that I've shared with you when we started the engagement.
All right, there's a whole lot there, but yeah, good morning to everyone. Thank you, Zanani, for this opportunity. And yeah, I was enjoying that presentation before the speaker was cut off. Ideally, the main emphasis here comes down to the individual, to the leader, and the personal leadership philosophy of a leader. You correctly said regarding the municipality, there's that 3 levels. There's the political leadership. We represent that. And then there's the administrative leadership, the executive directors and so forth, and the heads of the business units. And headed by the municipal manager. Our head will be the mayor. And then you have the most important commodity, which is the people, the public. And I think what happens is that when we go into local government, talking from a political leadership, we have to go as representatives of the public. And so what's going to happen? So what I've realized, I mean, what's it about? I'm 10 or 12 years in politics, in local government politics. And one of the things I've realized is that the best political leaders are the ones who have served the community before, apart from politics. Whether they were church leaders or community leaders or heads of civic associations, you know, and I'll tell you why, because the personal aspect comes in there. Because what happens is that it's almost like a personal calling. And sometimes it's because of the role models a person has, an upbringing they have, experiences they have, whether positive or negative. But something becomes a driver that sends them into a space where they can assist the community. And once they're assisting the community, if later on they decide that it's time to stand for election, or the people start to recognize them and want them as councillors and so forth, it becomes the right road to get into the political space thereafter. And so when you have leaders like that, they become the best leaders, because when you enter into the political domain, you enter into the space of the municipality, into the council, into the various portfolio committees, and you start working. One thing that has got to be at the forefront of our minds, it's a heart for the people. And I wouldn't say just the people have got to be there, but we have to have a heart for the people. And again, that has to do with defining our personal leadership philosophy, you know, having a heart for the people. So I would just begin there, you know, as an introductory statement. And I say that's why it's a heart issue, and it's a calling. And if that is settled in the heart of political leaders, you know, there's going to be little problems going forward. Unfortunately, if I could just bring in this, what we've experienced is the problem arises when it comes to working with the administrative leadership. because lots of, I would say not most, but many of the political leaders, councillors and political leaders, they start off on a good footing. They start off with a heart to serve people, and they get into council, and lots of them continue in that train of the philosophy of life. They continue to serve people. They're public servants, and that's what it's about. But sometimes, lots of times, with most administrative leaders, the directors, the executive directors, the senior managers of business units, sometimes they don't share the same empathy as political leaders, and that's where the disconnect comes in. So I think, what needs to be done is, I think the personal leadership philosophy of senior managers needs to be revisited. Municipalities need to revisit it. Besides teaching them about ethical leadership, they also need to teach them about how to get back onto the ground and to get a heart for the people, so that they could represent the public space, in the public space, but represent also as public servants. So if administrative leaders could become or have a heart for public service, like political leaders, there's going to be, let's see, more service delivery and more effective delivery of services and out there. I think I'll stop there.
That's awesome. And you've touched on quite a number of, I would say, important points, but we'll get to those points as we get the conversation going. As I will be allowing in my friend JP, and perhaps it is also proper to just briefly introduce him. JP is the Chief Audit Executive at George Local Municipality in the Western Cape. He is also a regional committee governor of the Institute of the Internal Auditors, South Africa, in the Western Cape region. He also holds quite another important, I would say, title as the chairperson of the Western Cape Municipal Chief Audit Executive Forum, and most importantly, as one of the accolades. In 2020, he was the Institute of Internal Auditors South Africa Internal Auditor of the Year. That says a lot about you, JP. And as I bring you in, and that's one thing that also I would like Councillor Nell to touch on, probably as we continue the conversation. We live in a society where we've got younger leaders. We live in a society where we've got, I won't say older leaders, but more experienced, yes, older leaders. Perhaps for this particular conversation, it is good that we've got, I'll say, those two generations, especially as we talk about leadership. And at some point, we will find an intersection, and how do these generations tackle the issue of leadership? Having said that, JP, let me hand over to you for your opening remarks.
Good morning, Zulani, Councillor Dan, and colleagues joining us on the platform. And thanks for having me. I think, Zulani, to respond to you, I think when you speak of the old and the new, both of them, we need to work together so we can shape the next generation of leadership to transform local government. So I like the approach of these webinars in terms of turning the ideation or the theory side of it into actions. We know the theory about integrity, honesty, and so forth, but how do you practice it in actions? And there's a growing call for action in terms of effective and efficient leadership. And there's demand from various stakeholders, whether it's the public, whether it's within the organization, all over the various stakeholders in terms of that. And it starts with initiatives like this. So a huge thanks to the Future Cities of Africa and the Municipal Ads for these webinars. I think when you think of an effective leader, Zulani and team, in the world of the work today, either from the old school, as I said, and from the new school as a mix in various municipalities. Some essential skills comes to mind, and it includes such skills as innovation. You need to be innovative. You need to have a vision, and the ability to have your people buy into the vision you have. Inner values is something that I will touch on later. It's something that was coming from the presentation as well, and directly linking to the topic of the day, which is personal leadership in the world of work today. But other skills for me comes to mind, like inspiration, effective communication, the ability to collaborate. Trust is a key part. I know the councillor's view in terms of the shared vision of both the political side and administrative. That needs to be on the same page. I fully agree with that, because if there is they're pulling in different directions, there will be a disjuncture in terms of that. So there need to be buy-in from both sides so that they work towards the same goal and objective in terms of that. Also from a governance perspective, just in terms of closing, there's a lot of guidance available which can be used, as I said, but that is the theory and the ideation of it, your King 4s, your all of those areas as what council should do, what admin, what the MM should do in terms of that. But for me, Zilani, in opening words, it boils down to two types of leadership. The first one for me will be a principle-based leader, someone that the approach is based on strong personal value system. And for me, values are instilled and it's owned to you. So it's something not teachable, although there's a lot of courses about ethics and so forth. You can't teach someone to be ethical. It comes from within. So one of the characteristics of an effective personal leader will be someone principle-based that demonstrate that honesty and courage in terms of his own personal life in terms of that. The other part of it is being yourself and having that value system to perform effectively. The second part I will call the agile or resilient leader. Right? Having the first part of it is your own thing, to be ethical and to have a value system, to be competent in what you do, both at the political and administrative level, so that I can unpack various examples of such principles. But that's the first part of it within you. And then the other part is the agileness, the resilient leader, especially in today's work world of work. It's very volatile and fluid, and it changes on an ongoing basis. And I think COVID is one of the first lessons that taught us that, and it's coming along in terms of the energy crisis and so forth. So we need to be resilient and agile to be able to respond to the changing needs in terms of that. But I think Zolani's opening remarks, I think that there should be two approaches for me in terms of being an effective leader personally as an individual, having a value-based system, as well as in the world today, you need to be agile and resilient and responding to some of the challenges that local government faces on a daily basis. Thanks. Over to you, Jelani.
No, thanks a lot, JP, for those remarks. And one of the reasons I approached you, I've been following some of the work that you are doing, even since when we were still in Sewraj Municipality. I think that's when we started to communicate, started to share experiences, and looking at the achievements, the role that you are even occupying within the Western Cape. It is high time, I believe, leaders of your caliber need to start even grooming even younger leaders. Because I think in our system, it has been my observation, and we can have a conversation on that. A person who leads a process, for some reason or the other, they don't take themselves as a leader. And I've always had an argument with all my teams that I've led in the past to say, if you've got a responsibility, you've got a process, the fact that you don't have people that you are leading, but you are leading a process, that makes you a leader. You need to project yourself to that aspect to say you are leading. It makes you even better when you have staff or people that you are leading. Now, I want to get back to Councillor Nel, because Honorable Councillor, you mentioned something that is fundamentally important, that I'll say the caliber or some of the senior managers we have in the system do not have the heart for the people. How can we deal with that? And JP, you can also come in, because that also talks to you as an executive. What is it that we need to do differently? Is it at the recruitment phase in terms of identifying these leaders? Is it politics trying to influence who then gets to those executive positions? Because it can only be true that if I'm a leader and I'm heartless, definitely I should not be there in that position for long. But then again, depending on how I ascended to the leadership position, because we know more often those who get appointed, for an example, might not necessarily have the skill to be in that particular position. But then because they have been parachuted through politics, they are then protected. As heartless as they might be, nobody can touch them. So Councillor Nel, how do we resolve that problem? And probably in also tackling that particular question, the issue of the capacity of councillors, which is also could be a contributing factor to the problem, because it has been reported not so long ago, if you can follow SALGA conversations, various conferences, even the Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, in talking about the capacity of councillors. Could that be a contributing factor as well in the heartlessness of, I would say, senior managers who occupy those critical positions? Over to you, Councillor Nel.
Thanks, Zelani. Yeah, I'll start with the councillors first. Yeah, unfortunately, you know, we in South Africa, and so we have the democratic model. It's we know with the new changes in the Electoral Act now, the individuals are coming into parliament and things, which I have a problem with that as well. I think the party-based politics can work. It has worked in various nations. But so sometimes, you know, you get the other councillors that are just party deployees. You know, come an election, we're looking for people who will be able to stand. We're not necessarily looking for community leaders, because some community leaders also are, you know, they're satisfied with in terms of serving the community without necessarily being enveloped by the political wineskin. So that's what happens. So when you have these kind of councils, and you know, in our municipality we have 60. We are a local government municipality. It's a very vibrant. We, you know, we have good clean audits, and well, not clean, but unqualified. We work into our clean, but we have had 17 so far. Unlike you guys down there, the Western Cape and things. What I've noticed, especially in this term of office, that councillors that took office in 2021, what I've seen was that they took office at a time when most of the veteran councillors had retired, and basically the councillors that had come in were you know, incapacitated. They didn't have the capacity. They needed to be trained. Even till this moment, as we speak, you know, if we have a council meeting tomorrow, there'll be at least about 20% of the councillors that really make positive, robust contributions. The rest are quiet. And so you're right about that 100%, that we need capacitation. SALGA has and always does a program. I think it's a 1-week program that runs at the beginning of an administration. That has been done, but some of the discussions that arose at those training was that that SALGA needs to capacitate counselors continuously. So there needs to be that continuous learning process throughout that 5-year term. So that's what counselors. Coming to the administrators, senior managers of municipalities. You're correct in saying that it's going to start. It will start for us to shift them, because these guys are skilled, they degreed, they're professional, they're high earners, they're living the life. So it's not necessarily that they may have a heart of empathy for people, because they are also headhunted. They leave the municipality tomorrow and will be grabbed by the corporate world. So they know that as well. But I think to give them, there has to be a change of heart. And we're talking about leadership because they are leaders, and we're talking about this change. There has to be this change of personal philosophy or personal attitude or operation or heart. And they have to embrace that. So I think that as a municipality and as councillors, that we need to bring this in. And these are some of the indicators that we could request in the recruitment phase and the interviews, that this is what we're looking for in a senior manager. How has he served? Is he involved? Is he involved in his local church? Is he, what's his personal philosophy of life? What's his social philosophy? Is he pro-poor? Is he social justice? Does he have for the? I think those will make some pertinent questions for the interview panel. But besides that, what about those senior managers that are already employed? Some of them, our municipality, for example, has put them all on permanent contracts. So they're not on the 5-year cycle, but they're in permanent contracts. So with these guys, I think that as councillors, we have to put the pressure. Pressure has got to come from the political leadership and who interact with the people. And we've been doing that. So what I've noticed in our municipality, which I favor, is that councillors, including the executive and the mayor, the troika as well, have been requesting that from time to time, and regarding different programs, that senior managers have to be on the ground, besides the imbizos, besides answering the question at the public imbizos, but they have to be on the ground when it comes to projects together with political leadership. And I think that's working well. The other thing could be training. Training in terms of what public service is about. That definitely they're not serving in the corporate space, but they're serving in the public space. So basically, training needs to be designed in terms of what this. You need to be a humanitarian. You need to be a humanitarian. You need to shift your heart, and you could enjoy a good salary. You could have a top position as a senior manager, but ultimately the work is about getting services on the ground. So I think those are some of the things that we could do to assist the senior managers to get more heart of empathy for public service.
Besides, JP. Your input, mentioned something that was important, specifically if you look at ethics, you look at values, and I'm glad Councillor just mentioned that in KwaDukuza, for an example, even the executives don't only interface with communities only at certain points. They go there with the councillors to engage with communities. Would you then say, even at a community level, because for an example, growing up, one might have aspired to become a doctor, a teacher, and you can name them on the basis of what we saw then. And perhaps that was the only thing that we knew then. Do you then believe if you've got executives that are interfacing with communities, as the councillor has indicated, can start at a community level to have the young ones who say, when I grow up, I want to be a municipal manager because I've got in my heart to change the state of service delivery, for an example, in my area. Will that help? If it will be something that gets, I would say, institutionalized, and not only being a prerogative of a certain municipality, but something that is embedded in the system itself to say, as the executives, let's leave our air-conditioned offices and be on the ground to be with the people. And through that, we can start influencing these who are coming up to have an aspiration to serve in a municipality. What's your take on that?
Thank you, Zlani. Now, I think it's an interesting question in view, but for me, it boils down to awareness. As indicated that when we grew up, the only sort of role models we had was teachers, the doctors, the lawyers, and so forth. We never knew of a thing named the municipality. We knew that they come to pick up our rubbish, they come to pick up this, but we didn't know the structures of that. So I think to create awareness, even at the school level, of such an institution, that we can come and engage with the learners at a younger stage, and also the tertiary education or framework in terms of curriculums, and focusing on offering local government as a study stream in terms of that, and making aware of we need certain skills like your engineers, your accountants, chartered accountants, so forth. Where are the skills that we need to build a future? Because we need to shape, and especially the new guys, because we will not be here forever in terms of that, and we need to have those sort of conversations. So I definitely support the view of the council that the municipality took in terms of being more active on the ground, visiting sites on a regular basis, and not only at IDP meetings and budget meetings and visos, whatever the case may be, but being more visible on it and visiting the outer towns areas and stuff like that. So I fully agree that would definitely assist in creating awareness on what the municipality actually do and what is required of a municipality in terms of that. But you should remember that local government is highly regulated, right? There's legislation for everything, even for the appointment process of senior managers. There's regulations dealing with those. You have the minimum competency framework legislations prescribing what qualifications a senior manager, CFO, or director should have in terms of that. We recently also had the municipal staffing regulations also prescribing certain other requirements in terms of competency, the performance of it, in terms of that, bringing a lot of framework and enforcing local governments to actually follow a certain process in recruiting a certain caliber of administrator or or so forth. But with that legislation, that covers only what the academic side or the experience side of it. The councillor mentioned something in terms of the humanity of the person. And for me, okay, so we can identify, we can appoint a qualified person, a doctor, or whatever the case may be, or lawyer. But there should be a step further in terms of clarifying the roles and responsibilities of the two frames or the two branches. And when it comes down to differences, it will be due to an expectation gap. So I think the councillor is correct in indicating that at the start of the process, that could be managed in terms of creating what we call a shared vision between the political side and the administrative side, because we know our objectives, and in local government, we are in the business of service delivery. You earlier indicated that you see a municipality as a business in terms of profit and the shareholders and so forth, so we can link to that. But in our case, if we take that notion of in terms of seeing the municipality as a business, is that our first core mandate is to deliver services in terms of that. So the political side, administrative side, should be on the same sort of level in trying to appoint someone that would implement those policies and objectives of the council in the end of the day. but definitely I think we should reach out more, create awareness, build those kind of interest in terms of that, and some sort stuff could be that we hold a career day or go speak to the schools, practical issues when we do that in terms of advocating the value of the municipality in terms of that. So definitely there is some opportunity there to explore, and at a younger age we're trying to cultivate these leaders to come into space and make a difference in the lives of our people. Thanks, Sewraj.
Thanks a lot, JP. At this point, I'll be looking at some of the questions that we've received, but I want to touch on something which I would like both of you to express your view, and it's something that Councillor Nel also touched on, looking at, for an example, the fixed term contracts. It's one issue with executives being permanent, but there's performance management system, and it's a conversation that also took a center stage about last week. I was invited by the Chartered Institute of Audit Governance, Oversight and Leadership, the South African chapter of Ziqalo. And a performance management system is one thing that Ziqalo has committed that it needs to focus on, because it's my view, and both of you will probably express your views, that it doesn't matter whether it's local government, it's provincial government, it's national government. Performance management system, I believe, it's not being used to achieve its intended purpose. Well, what's your view on that, and what needs to be done to correct that? Because Councillor Nel, as you say, for me, it doesn't matter. You can be permanent in your job, for an example. But if you apply performance management system for what it is and for what it is intended, we could be in a position to start dealing with some of these failures that we see. Your views on that?
Let the councillor go first. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, if you look at PMS, you look at the whole performance management, you see, you know, it's also in its early stages. You know, if you look at the past decade or two, that's performance management has been making its way in now into local government. Before it was very more aligned to corporate companies and things. It's a good tool nonetheless, but because of it being fairly a new system, and also added to that is that performance management, both the indicators have to be set by council, and then the measure of it has to be determined by council, and the performance bonuses as well. So that whole process goes through council. And now you got to realize that every 5 years you have a change of the administration, a change of the councillors, you know, at least maybe half of them change, and training has to start again. And like I said, for where we are currently, most of the councillors are brand new. When you mention performance management, they'll have an idea, okay, we're here to measure the performance of the executive directors, but the question is how do we do it? And like JP was saying, yeah, everything is regulated in local government, so there's a process to follow. But we are learning, and maybe learning too late. And I would say this, that we just a month or two ago, you know, made the pronouncement on the performance bonuses and the performance management, because the senior managers needed to be paid out. And most of the political parties there, both the ruling party and the opposition, were not in favor of paying most senior managers anything, not even giving them a percent. We were not in agreement with the percentage and this what they had scored. But we also realized that if we refuse to pay them, we will also be putting the entire council at jeopardy, because senior managers could take us to court, and they could say that, listen, this is the same council, that does not want to pay us, they set all these performance indicators. There's the 20 performance indicators. And I've done that. I've got evidence, portfolio of evidence. I've done all of these. I've checked all the boxes. I deserve my performance bonuses. So what we're realizing is that we had to pay them. But we realize now in the next few months, when we start reviewing the key performance indicators, that is where we are going to tighten the belt a bit. And that is where we're going to really place the indicators that we want to see. So we're realizing that a bit late, but we realize it nonetheless. And I think then we'll be able to achieve what you're speaking about, Zolani. We'll be able to really have an efficient performance management system to measure senior managers.
JP?
Thanks, Lani. Thanks, Councillor as well. For me, performance management should be sort of developmental and not punitive, right? So performance management, inclusive of what we call in the government the SDBIP, the Service Delivery and Implementation Plan, which the KPIs are included, or key performance indicators are included there, is a process which measures the implementation of a municipality strategy. So that key performance indicators should be aligned to it. And I note that some of these might be compliance related and tick boxes should be easy to achieve or get a bonus in terms of that. But I think that performance should be used as a management tool to plan, monitor, measure, and review the indicators to ensure efficiency and effectiveness on it. So there is some interventions that could be used, and the councillor mentioned one of the key issues is that performance management starts with development of, for instance, your IDP and your SDBIP prior to a commencement of a financial year. So it's at this stage, and very important, that all directors and municipal managers and portfolio councils ensure that there's complete alignment between all the elements of the SDB and the objectives of what council would want to achieve in that financial year, linking to the budget processes in every effect, so that the top level, or what we call it, the top level SDBIP, is then implemented in such a manner, because normally what happens after the SDBIP is compiled, in terms of legislation, as the council indicated, the directors and the MMs should sign performance agreements on an annual basis. And it's normally based on those SDBIP KPIs that's included in the original scorecard. However, nothing prevents the executive to add additional KPIs in the performance agreement of specific MMs or directors, to add those kind of measurements that they would want to see in terms of that. It's normally based on SDBIP, and it's cleaner in terms of audit processes and so forth if it's aligned to measure it in terms of that. However, there is opportunity to amend the performance agreements to add some of those KPIs that would we want to see, like innovation or bringing in money or obtaining, whatever the case may be, what the vision of the council is. But performance definitely is an important tool of the corporate governance sort of framework or triangle as to how we can ensure the key word of accountability, accountability towards people, and also the ability to keep people accountable, reporting to you. And that tool could be used as that, but again, it should be focused on the right things, measuring the right things. You can't sit in a situation where we, for example, have clean audits and so forth as one of the key KPIs of the CFO, but then on the technical side, there's nothing that say that potholes should be fixed or whatever the case may be. So it needs to be aligned in terms of that and measuring the impact they talk about. We're now talking about input and output KPIs. Those KPIs should be revised in terms of ensuring that we really receive the impact and the output of it, and not just we need to have a piece of paper served to council, and here's a piece of paper, yes, but there need to be another measurement in terms of that. So that's my view. Thanks, Lano.
Okay, no, thanks a lot for those responses, and specifically on the KPIs and the targets. At some point in this year, we will be having a session looking at the audit outcomes. And I think that will link nicely with this particular conversation, because there's often a question specifically on audit outcomes to say, you've got a municipality that gets a clean audit, but you look at the service delivery record, you can't match that. But that's a conversation for later this year. As we get to the questions, and we received a question from Terence, and again, as I normally do, I used to serve under Terence, I think about 10 years ago, when I was still in the Western Cape. And it also brings in this core generation aspect I was talking about earlier on. Thanks, Terence, for your questions. And I can see you are active today as always. But there was a question that came through. You might have touched both of you on it, but let's just reflect on it. Terence says, ethical leadership. How important is the tone at the top? Signing off a commitment to apply ethical standards. Does this serve any purpose if the individual is not held accountable? And he goes further to say, all public employees should sign a declaration to serve the citizens. And as I say, it's something that you might have touched on, but also in the comments. He also makes a comment to say, when you join the public service, whether as a politician or in an admin capacity, you must have the intention to serve the people. Any comments on those inputs from Terence? Let's start with Honorable Councillor.
Thanks, Zolani, and thanks, Terence, for that question. Yeah, I must agree with Terence. And it's amazing he brings out this issue that it's not just relegated to the senior management, but it should be, we should hold all municipal employees, all officials accountable. We've had two incidents. We've had investigations done recently. One had to do with the finance department, and basically one of the officials, right down to the cashier, basically, when we changed bank accounts, had mistakenly forgotten to kind of shift one of the companies over, and millions had collected in our old bank account, and it just went without notice for many years, and we in a place where the CFO, the CFO is being held responsible, and yet there's been a whole line of officials where it goes down to that cashier, goes to the supervisor, goes to the department head, and then a director, and then the CFO. And so we also started to question that process and said that, listen, the investigation needs to be done properly, and the person that definitely that department, that business unit needs to be definitely capacitated. There's also a lack of capacity. Organogram needs to be filled. Employees, sometimes that becomes the problem. And that the capacity of that department, there's lots of vacancies, and sometimes the financial problems. It's a kind of catch-22 situation, but this has been the result. So it needs to be addressed. But I would say that in this regard, you cannot just hold the senior manager, the senior person, the CFO responsible, because then you'll also have to hold the municipal manager, because he's ultimately, he has the vested powers to give oversight and accountability for bank accounts and all of that. So, all of us, and then it'll be the council that also plays its oversight. So yeah, I think it's everyone. We've also had on officials in terms of public participation, where one of the officials was kind of siphoning the stipend that was due to ward committee members, siphoning it into four different accounts that he had opened for himself. and that was in the previous administration, but it surfaced now. And if you look at that, yeah, it's right down there. It's an employee right down in the department. So who do we catch? I mean, ultimately, public participation will fall under the MM, in corporate services. It's a difficult one. So I would totally agree that the ethical leadership and that even the training of that, the training for ethics within the workplace needs to be done on all levels, and accountability that everyone, employees from the bottom to the top, need to be held accountable. Thanks.
Your insights, JP?
Yeah, thanks. I'll be short on this one. No, I definitely agree that tone should be at the top, right? You should set the tone at the top. If you take your personal example, personal circumstances at home, because you're discussing now the personal leadership of a leader, right, or the philosophy of a leader. When you're at home with your wife and kids, you need to play a certain role because they look up to you with what you do. Which means if you're going to do bad stuff, it's more than likely either they will do it or not do it based on your experience because they look up to you. Similar to in a professional environment, when you're leading a team or a team of employees or managers and so forth, they also look up to you. So they will do what you do. If you come in late in the morning, they'll also probably do that. If you leave early and stuff like that. So there's a manner in how you behave that sort of rubs off to the lower staff. And even in their case, when they perform in a certain manner, they start reporting to them. Will also start performing in a manner. So I agree that the tone starts at the top, so we need to lead by example. And there's a lot of guidance available in terms of what we should do or we should be doing in terms of creating that setting of the tone, that leadership, the ethics, the corporate governance, how to lead ethically and effectively in terms of that. But there's also, touching what the council indicated in the accountability framework, is that who is ultimately accountable when something goes wrong in terms of that. So we need to review the characteristics and structures and the accountability processes prevalent in local government, and ensuring that these structures and processes result in good governance enforced by ethical leadership. And it could include some various structures as indicated. You have the council, which is the governing body, the head of it, setting the tones, policy, and so forth to meet on a regular basis. Then you have the management team in place that should implement those governance processes and policies of the council. But there's other governance frameworks also involved. You should have an audit committee, you should have internal audit function, you have the AG, you have your IDP processes, there's a risk process, performance management, promoting a culture of ethics, and so a host of other structures that could be brought into this sort of framework where we can say, okay, no, these other structures and frameworks in place as well. But definitely, tone at the top, I would agree with that in terms of setting it and setting example and leading by ethical example in terms of that. So thanks, Zolani.
Thanks for those inputs. And coming to the issue of accountability and responsibility, I also think a lot needs to be done starting at the lowest of levels, because yes, accountability is something else, but where's the sense of responsibility? It needs also to be inculcated to that level to say, JP might be accountable as my superior, but the responsibility, because if you're a responsible official, then those are some of the things that need to come, especially as the councillor was outlining the issue that they faced with. It starts where the transaction started, by an official asking him or herself, what is my role in this value chain? Yes, JP will be accountable, but am I responsible enough in terms of the actions that I'm involved in? There was also a second question. This one, I think it talks to, as you mentioned, the JP, when you opened the current state that we live in, the fluidity, the agility. Because this one, it's more about remote working. It's from Lazarus. Lazarus says remote working can result in reduced operational costs, including high productivity due to eliminations of inefficiencies. Employees end up experiencing mental health, especially depression. How do we then ensure effective leadership regarding these particular matters? And again, before I give it to you, also sharing from personal experience, is that if you lead a team or you work with people, especially at a leadership level, you need to understand your team. You need to be supportive. You need to be open, because some of the things need that level of openness for a team member to be able to come to you to say, these are the struggles that I'm faced with. How do we then begin to deal with? But my observation, and again, it can be rebutted to say, more often, some of the leaders, they don't care about the human element, the soft side of a person. It's more about delivering the results without really looking at the environment. Because with COVID-19, we've learned a lot of things, and I suspect looking at this particular question statement, it relates to that, because remote working pre-COVID was really not something that was in our vocab, but COVID brought it for, and it's something that we've gotten used to, which also came with its challenges, because we can all agree to say, when we started working remotely, even myself, I thought, yeah, I'll be having more time in terms of the work environment. But that's the time when we worked more, whereby there was hardly an 8 to 5, and sometimes hardly a weekend. And those are the things that build up and then lead to an ineffective team or team members. And I'll throw this one at you, JP, to say, how do we deal with this? Because it really has an impact, not only on operations, but let's look at the human element, because without that particular team member, it means as a leader, you need to find ways to navigate that particular space. How do we deal with this?
Yeah, thanks, Zolani. For me, I think it boils down to maturity of the department and team, right? The working from home arrangements, it was forced on us in terms of the lockdown, so we couldn't get around it. So only essential workers were allowed to get out. So they be, as an organization or a municipality, allowed certain individuals to work from home because it was forced on us. But it sometimes worked well in certain circumstances. We continued up until today as well. There still is a function that can work from home. But for me, the working from home has advantages as well as its challenges and negatives in terms of that. But because the reason I'm saying it boils down to maturity of it, you need, for a person to work effectively from home, it needs to be independent and be able to work and function without supervision, right? So if someone junior on the floor that needs instructions to perform his work on a daily basis, he can't be productive when working at home, he or she, because they will need to have guidance, on-site guidance, and so forth. So I think if you want to implement a working from home arrangement, I fully understand and agree towards the mental health issue and allowing flexibility, because we're not in an environment anymore where we need to sit 8 to 5 in office in terms of that, being fixed on it. So the environment is fluid, so we need to respond as when it changes. So I agree that there should be some flexibility in the working hours of municipalities to allow for these individuals to actually gain some experience and exposure in terms of experiencing that balance of work and personal life. When we were at home, it was just work. So it's difficult to do that. So I think there should be a hybrid approach in implementing this approach, and not a blanket say everyone work from home, because that might blur the lines in terms of where where are my safe space in terms of mental health and your own personal growth. Because when I leave office, I go to home and I leave work at work, and I need to be a dad and a husband at home, and I need to have the whole responsibility. So it's a balancing act for me in terms of approaching, if you decide working from home, in terms of that. But that's on a personal level. The other side is the risks of working from home in terms of threats, cybersecurity issues, connectivity, budget-related issues. Does the people have the equipment at home to actually do their job effectively? So that's the admin side of it. We also need to consider, because not all municipalities are equipped to allow working from home arrangements and so forth. So for me, I'm neither here neither there on this one, Zilani. Thanks.
I don't know, you know, I think times have changed. We're kind of in a post-COVID season, so I was never in favor of that. You know, work should be work, home should be home, work should be work. I think there's more discipline in the work environment. But as JP said, yeah, COVID forced us into that, you know. But I think load shedding will force us back to work because, you know, there's no way you're going to have Zoom meetings at home. And I mean, you could see we lost our presenter today. You know, there's technology has its issues, and then there's load shedding as well. And then there's also the issue of people can slacken off. Then we're talking about personal leadership as well. We need to work in compartments. We need to work in spaces, you know, and I think we should allow homes to be homes, because you know, during that COVID, working from home, even people are still some of them are working from home. But it's also affected a lot of marriages. It's affected a lot of parenting. It's made it difficult because, as JP said, you know, if deadlines and things are not set, or sometimes the deadlines now. I mean, I know I got a student at a daughter at university. She's a student at Stellenbosch, and I have a son who is in metric. And my daughter, I mean, her assignment is due at midnight. You know, now. If that happens in the work environment, say, okay, it's due by this day, you know, where we have to write our comments on the budget and so forth, it's due, it was due the other day at midnight, you know, and here was I at 11 p.m. kind of putting it together. And so I think, yeah, that's what we do. So we don't manage our time properly. It starts affecting our lives, and it starts to affect our personal lives, and that will affect our capacity too. So no, I don't approve of that.
No, that's noted. That's noted. I don't think we really need to exhaust the 2 hours that we budgeted for, especially given the fact that we lost Umbusi. But before we get to what I'll call your closing remarks, looking in the conversation itself, and it somehow links again to a comment by Terence on ethical leadership that needs to start at the top with the political leadership, who will then set the tone for administration leadership in a municipality. But in framing this statement as well, and I think you'll assist me greatly, Honorable Councillor Nell, on this one. In a situation where, because it happens often, you've got a political party with its structure, you will have your chairperson and all the related positions. It might be in a region. Now, the regional chairperson probably becomes, let's say, the accounting officer. Now you've got the executive mayor, who is probably at a political level, is lower ranked than the accounting officer. We'll do then say, in fact, I believe the personal leadership that we talk about will be able to deal with that. And earlier on, JP talked about maturity. Is it something that we experience as well? And is there a way to deal with that? Or the person in me and you should be matured enough to say, irrespective of our ranks in political party, when we get to the municipality as the institution, there ought to be that level of, whether we call it respect, respecting the positions that we have, in the municipality. What's your take on that?
Very sensitive question, but yeah, you're right, Zolani. It's a problem. It's a problem everywhere, and it's a reality. We found that it can be a major stumbling block to service delivery. We've had that where certain political parties will caucus sometimes directly before, in the early hours of the morning, before the council meeting. And so what happens there sometimes, because of, you know, the factionalism that exists within the political party, because of reasons like you mentioned, positions and so forth, you have different camps within political parties. And, you know, it's a domestic problem. It's a domestic problem that comes from the outside, but it does affect service delivery. And so there were times that other political parties that were waiting for the council to start, and you know, one political party was still in another room, you know, and it's time up, and certain councillors will walk out, and then you don't get a quorum, and then the meeting can't take place. And sometimes the caucuses of political parties take longer depending on the sensitivity of the matters, the item, the issues. And, you know, and there's no decision on the item. There's no debate on it. And in the end, the man on the ground, the people, the public, the people who is supposed to be servicing, yeah, they get the butt end of this whole thing. So I think we need to grow up. There needs to be, in South Africa, South Africa is highly hyped as a political nation. I think politics, you know, politics is science. You know, politics is not corrupt. Politics is science. As JP mentioned, and you know, South Africa is brilliant in terms from our constitution to our acts, to our regulations, to local government policies. I mean, municipalities will put a policy first and then develop bylaws on that. I mean, it's there, as mentioned. But how much of those bylaws and things, how much of enforcement or implementation are there? That we don't see that. So even in terms of the politics, you know, I think, you know, it's needed, but I think if we could put service delivery at the forefront, it would help us. But politics is it's politics. Let's be honest. It's becoming a stumbling block to the people. You know, I mean, look at certain metros, the coalitions, the changes, and you just feel for the people on the ground with the drama, political drama. Yeah, but no, you're right. It does affect. It does affect in a major way, and I think maybe as a political leadership, there's maturity that has to come in. We need to mature.
No, thanks a lot for that input, because it will go a long way. The more we have these conversations and we are honest and frank about them, and I like the way you've answered the question, in as much as you alluded to it being sensitive. Yes, it's a sensitive issue, but until we get to that point where we deal with sensitive issues, we won't be able to solve some of the challenges that we are currently faced with. As I've indicated, perhaps it could be where we say we end the conversation today. And as we do that, I'll give each of you an opportunity just to make the closing remarks. But on my end, it will be to thank both of you for availing yourselves for this particular conversation. And based on what has transpired, I can guarantee you it's not the last time that we are having conversations. It could be another topic, but out of this conversation, there are other things that came through, which as we have the conversations throughout the year, I'll reach out to you again for those specific topics. Let me give you, JP, a few minutes for your summation and closing remarks, and perhaps on this topic of personal leadership. What is it that you are leaving our audience with that they can take and package for themselves so that they become the better leaders of today and better leaders of the future.
Thanks so much, Zolani, for that. Now, I think thanks again for the UNO team at the Municipal Edge, as well as Dan's team in terms of the Future Cities Africa, for these initiatives, just to create awareness and, as I said, to shape the next generation of leadership of local government. From my side, I think the key takeaways is that to be an effective leader or personal leader in this new world of work, my advice or my key points will be that firstly, there's two types of leadership or qualities of a leader that should be there. The first one, again, being principle-based leadership. This is leadership based on strong value system in terms of integrity, honesty, and those kind of issues. And those things can't be taught. That's your value system within yourself. So strengthening those core principles and values in that and living it out in your personal life will assist greatly when you do it in your professional life in terms of that. So the first thing is that personal leader, a principle-based and based on a strong value system. And the values can include integrity, honesty, objectivity, competence, a lot of nice words you can use there. But just the strongness of that will indicate how you will lead a team, how you lead an environment, either politically, administratively, because that's within yourself. So if you strengthen those principles at first, it's a good start in terms of that. And then ending off with regards to what I call the agile or resilient leader, right? Just two portfolios joined in is how to that person respond to the environment when changes happen. Now, agile, a living agile started with the software industry, where they picked up a bug and they went to go fix the bug and they move on until another bug picks up, they go back and fix it. So it's ongoing retrospective work that they're doing in terms of that. In real time, that when they pick up something, they go fix it. So we need to also, in our leadership, in today's world of work, be sort of that agile and resilience approach in when something happens, we need to have the ability to quickly respond in terms of what we should do. Because at today's world, we now, it's the speed of light now. We can't wait too long for stuff to happen. If something breaks now, we need to respond immediately in terms of that. And those kind of issues will ineffectively build a leader to ensure that there's effective leadership and service delivery within in our municipality, as well as in local government in general. But for me, in closing remarks, those are the two elements: is the value-based leader, and then you is agile, resilient, or competent leader in terms of leading a department, either administratively or politically in that environment. Thank you, Zolani.
All right, Zolani, I'll close by doing the same. I want to thank you for facilitating this meeting. Thank you, Municipal Edge and Future Cities Africa, and what's it, Ziqalo, and Salga. Yeah, it's a pertinent platform and a pertinent space for all that will listen and tune into this even in the future. I'd like to close by just giving my story about how I got into this. Basically, in my primary calling in life, because of personal problems that I had as a teenager on drugs and things, and then I was saved. I was a Christian. I got saved. I came to know the Lord Jesus Christ and became part of the church. Started to serve in the church and things, and I realized that this is what I want to do. I want to serve people. I wanted to introduce people to God, and because I came out of this hectic, abusive life, drugs and things like that, and gangsterism, and I felt it to be a calling to help others to come to the same realization. But as I progressed with church and I started to pastor, I trained and I started to pastor, became a qualified pastor, and I started to pastor the church. But as I pastored the church, You're pastoring a church, speaking and teaching and preaching all these nice things about what God wants, about what he expects, and trying to build these lives to be the same. But all around us, we're in a nation that was crumbling. Infrastructure that is crumbling, crime that was picking up, and homes that are breaking, and children on drugs, and the social problem was there. And the social problem was also the political problem, and which local, especially with service delivery. And around 2008, I connected with a man from Malaysia who became a mentor to me. And one of the very important aspects for all who are listening and tuning into this broadcast is the idea of role models in the formation of values, as JP mentioned about values, and the formation of our leadership and personal leadership. Because personal leadership, it's a product of a philosophy. It's a product of values, as the presenter mentioned early on, before he fell off the conversation. And so when I connected with this man in 2008, and he basically training us to be better pastors, but showing us that the church has to become relevant. And the church was basically being a spiritual institution, but having little relevance on the ground. And that made a lot of sense to me. And the examples we inundated in the Bible, for example, Jesus himself, he was a man on the ground, and helping people and changing the environment. And that's what we realized that needed to be done. And I think from that time, I think it was 2 years, I connected with him in 2008. And by 2011, I had entered into local government because I saw the need to find a space to enter in, and local government was one of them. Directly connected to him, and he taught me the values about having clean hands and a pure heart, which, like a spirit of righteousness, which allowed me, even when I went into council, for example, was able to scrutinize the documents, was able to push for things that are anti-corruption, things that are ethical. It's in the local government space, you call it ethical. In the church, you'll call it righteousness. You'll call it clean hands, pure heart, no wickedness, So it seemed to be a flow of that. So, and why I bring it up, it shows you that your personal leadership is crafted by your values and what has been built inside of you. And we have to use that to give expression, whether in local government or wherever the spaces we are in, and it adds value. It can add value rather than just having somebody that's, empty, just qualified academically. And we look at those as leaders, and that's not necessarily so. There's a lot of people that are super qualified, have degrees and double doctorates or whatever, but live pathetic lives. They, can't even keep their marriages together. Their children are all over the shore. They're stealing money and then corrupt dealings. And, how do we measure leadership? Leadership is about also doing life. It's about doing life. It's about doing life with the relationships we have and learning to work. I think somebody mentioned that early on, with family or your neighbors, friends, church members, or whatever, as you learn, because then you learn teamwork. And teamwork, you go into the local government space, you realize, hey, this is easy. I can work with this department. They all are stressing, impatient, and you learn to work. Like, you see this as a family. So it was a good way to change our views and our thinking. But how I got into politics is because a friend of my spiritual father, he's Dr. Tundi Bakri. He's from Nigeria. And Dr. Tundi Bakri he stood as with Muhammadu Buhari in the previous election, he stood as his running mate, as a deputy president. But he's a preacher. He's a preacher. And so that was my role model as well. I began to look at, listen, hey, it's time that, we stop being just pastors of churches, leaders of churches, and just hidden behind four walls. And we need to become, rather than leaders of churches, become leaders of the community, lead a people, a better life for all. And that was the motivations, and those are the things that helped me, and that kind of mentoring and that kind of philosophy of life developed my leadership and helped me to get into these spaces. It built the integrity in, it brought the accountability in, to working with the team, and a whole lot of other things. It also brought in succession, where I work with that, knowing that there's younger people. I think that was the question early on. There's younger people, and I know they see things differently. Times are changing. They are much more innovative with technology. It's all required. The spaces are changing. Our population is a greater percentage of youth. So I realized that it's time that we start, you also look at that. You got to look at successes. You got to look at young people that you can bring around you that can enter these spaces. And I've done that even myself, even one of the young men from our church, Sipo, we kind of raised him up, taught him this way, trained him, and he's in local government as well, and doing a good job and clean, and that's what's required. So I enjoyed the topic, I enjoyed the topic. It's close to my heart, and yes, it's needed in local government. It's maybe the face of leadership is changing in the future, where we are looking into our hearts again, going back to the drawing board and becoming better people so we can be better leaders. I just thought I'd share that with you. Thank you.
No, once more, thanks a lot for firstly honoring the invite, but also the inputs that you provided. Whoever will be accessing this recording, I believe there is a lot that will be learned out of this particular conversation. We are not talking for the sake of talking, but for me, we were trying to get to the mind of these aspirant leaders, to the heart of these leaders that we want to see. On that, I thank you very much. Also, thanking the team from Future Cities Africa. I know, Dan, as I've indicated, you and the team works tirelessly in bringing these webinars together. Don't get tired because there is value out of them. To the team at Municipal Edge, this is what we should be continuing doing, because the more we take these conversations, not only to be conversations, but also to be something that will impact life outside the conversation itself. That goes a great deal. And our partners, Sigfaro and Salga, we are in this together. And definitely as we go along, we will build even more partnerships because as I'm sitting here, I'm already thinking about next year in terms of the programs or sessions that we need to have. Perhaps at some point, JP, to look at the audit function as an assurance function within a municipality, because it plays a critical role. And it is a role that many either don't understand or they ignore. We need to talk about those and how do we change that narrative. And again, Councillor Nell, as you've indicated, the 20% of councillors that actually make the contribution throughout the council term. I think those are some of the things that we really need to start zooming into to say, how do we take the 20% to 40% to 60% up to a point where at least plus 90% of councillors are active within councils? It's not going to happen on its own by just us talking about it. We need to come up with practical ways on how we deal with these particular problems. On that note, ladies and gentlemen from our audience, without you, without your comments, your questions and inputs, we will not be having this conversation. Thanks to you as well. Until we meet in our next session. On that note, goodbye and enjoy.